In 2023, famous rapper Ice Cube went on a podcast and dropped a bombshell that no one was expecting.
Okay, let's take rap music.
Let's take it.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons. So
Literally the same people?
literally the same people.
When a hip-hop legend who's been in the game for over 3 decades, when someone who helped create the very culture we're talking about, when Ice Cube himself drops knowledge like that, you better stop what you're doing and listen. Because what he revealed wasn't some wild conspiracy theory cooked up by internet trolls. This was coming from a man who'd been behind the scenes, who'd seen the machine work, who'd lived this industry from the inside out.
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. So, it seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that, the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry. This to me is in somewhat, some social engineering going on here to make sure those prisons stay full. Now,
Those words should have terrified every black person in America. They didn't force you to rap about murder and drugs. They just made sure those were the only songs that saw the light of day. And Ice Cube wasn't alone. Dame Dash, co-founder of Rockefeller Records, the man who helped build Jay-Z's empire, he heard Cube's words and said,
"It's true. It's obvious."
"These are the architects of hip-hop culture telling us we'd been played." Ice Cube calls it social engineering, a deliberate plan to make sure the prison stayed full, to make sure young black men kept walking into those cells like lambs to the slaughter. And the weapon they used against us? Our own music and culture. Today we're going to expose exactly how America took the most powerful black art form of the last 50 years and turned it into a recruitment tool for the prison system. How they stole our respectability, our dignity, and our future. Because if Ice Cube was right, and all the evidence suggests he was, then every violent rap song, every video glorifying prison culture, every lyric about selling drugs and rivals, it had all been part of a master plan to destroy black lives in America. But Ice Cube's revelation in 2023 wasn't the first time someone tried to blow the whistle on this conspiracy. 11 years earlier, something happened that sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community. On April 24th, 2012, at exactly 1:30 p.m., someone using an anonymous Gmail account under the fake alias John Smith would send an email that would change everything. According to this letter, sometime in the early 1990s, this person had been invited to a closed-door meeting at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. He described himself as a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. The meeting had about 25 to 30 people, mostly familiar faces from the music business. But there was also a small group of unfamiliar faces, men in suits who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize with anyone else. One of these suited men stood up and made an announcement that left the room stunned. He told them that the companies they worked for in the music industry had been building privately owned prisons. Since these prisons were government-funded, the more prisoners they housed, the more money they made. And here's where it gets truly sinister. Their job, as music industry executives, was to market music that promoted criminal behavior. Rap music was specifically chosen as the weapon of choice. The letter soon spread across the internet like wildfire. Hip-hop blogs picked it up. Social media exploded with theories. But here's the thing, whether this specific meeting happened exactly as described or not, the pattern it revealed was undeniable. And most importantly, other industry insiders started coming forward with their own stories that backed up the letter's claims. Now, before you dismiss this as some far-fetched conspiracy theory, let me tell you something that might change your mind. The United States government has actually used music to manipulate and control people before, multiple times, and we have the receipts. Between 2009 and 2012, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, launched a secret operation to use Cuban hip-hop artists to undermine President Raul Castro's government. USAID started recruiting Cuban musicians for what they disguised as cultural initiatives, but their real goal was to boost these rappers' visibility and create a fan movement that would challenge the Cuban government. They even paid $155,000 to underwrite an arts and music festival. But the festival wasn't about celebrating culture, it was about psychological warfare. Their secret mission was to seed the minds of festival organizers with new ideas and get them to send high-impact messages to audiences that would turn them against their own government. Of course, USAID wasn't dumb enough to do this directly. They used contractors and shell companies to hide their involvement. But when the Cuban government figured out what was happening, the whole operation fell apart. And let me remind you guys, this was official US government policy, using hip-hop as a tool of war. But Cuba was just the beginning. As it turns out, the CIA has been using music for decades to achieve their political goals. They funded a Russian composer named Nicholas Nabokov to mount exhibitions and stage concerts across Europe, all designed to combat the appeal of communism. They hired multiple artists to fight communism through their songs. The CIA also got their hands deep into jazz music. They sponsored Louis Armstrong's tours in Europe and Africa, turning America's greatest black musicians into unwitting ambassadors for American foreign policy. Dizzy Gillespie joined the first State Department-organized tour in 1956. Dave Brubeck went on a 12-concert tour of the USSR in 1985. So if they were willing to use Cuban hip-hop to try to topple Castro's government, and if they used jazz legends like Louis Armstrong as tools of foreign policy, if they spent decades and millions of dollars manipulating music to achieve political goals, then tell me, what makes you think they wouldn't use hip-hop to achieve their domestic goals? What makes you think they draw the line at using our own culture against us? The precedent was already set. The playbook was already written. All they had to do was turn it inward. But the government's manipulation of music wasn't just about foreign policy. They had been targeting black artists specifically for decades, long before hip-hop was even born. And once you understand this history, Ice Cube's claims start to make a lot more sense. The FBI's COINTELPRO program, which we've covered extensively in our videos on the Black Panther Party, didn't just target political activists. They also systematically surveilled black musicians who they saw as threats to the status quo. They investigated jazz pianist Nat King Cole, monitoring his performances and personal associations. Hell, they followed Jimi Hendrix so closely that the FBI compiled detailed reports on his drug use, his relationships, and his political statements. You see, the government understood something that many people still don't. Black musicians had always been more than entertainers. They were cultural leaders who could shape public opinion and inspire social movements. And according to white America, that made them dangerous. So when hip-hop emerged in the late 1970s and 1980s, this surveillance intensified dramatically. In 1989, after NWA released The Police, the FBI did something unprecedented. They sent an official letter to NWA's record label, Priority Records, expressing their displeasure with the song. Think about that. The federal government was so threatened by a rap song that they felt the need to officially respond. Of course, they didn't stop with NWA. The FBI launched thorough investigations into Tupac Shakur, tracking his movements, monitoring his associates, building cases against him. They did the same thing to Biggie, Wu-Tang, and countless of other artists. By the early 2000s, this surveillance had become so systematic that it earned a name, the Hip-Hop Police. The NYPD created secret dossiers on rappers, tracking who they associated with, what cars they drove, what clubs they went to. Detective Derek Parker, who helped create these files, later admitted they would pressure venues to cancel rap concerts and shows. Think about what that means. The police were violating rappers' First Amendment rights, shutting down their ability to perform and make money, all because they didn't like the content of their music. And this targeting continues today. In 2019, the NYPD sent a letter to Rolling Loud festival organizers listing 5 rappers, including Casanova, and warning that if these artists performed, there would be a higher risk of violence. Today, instead of targeting political activists, they use more subtle methods to control the black public image. Now let's follow the money, because that's where this conspiracy gets really interesting. If Ice Cube was right about the same people owning record labels and prisons, then we should be able to trace those connections. And guess what? We can. The 3 major record labels that dominated hip-hop for decades were Warner Records, Sony Music Group, and Universal Music Group. These companies controlled what music got promoted, what artists got signed, and what messages reached the masses. On the other side, you have the 2 largest private prison companies in America, CoreCivic and GEO Group. These corporations own more private prisons than anyone else in the country, and they've built their entire business model around keeping those facilities packed with inmates. BlackRock and Vanguard, two of the world's largest investment management firms were among the biggest shareholders. At the same time, these exact same companies held major positions in the record labels. Now here's what made this especially suspicious. Private prisons operate on a simple business model. The more prisoners they house, the more money they make from government contracts. In fact, many of these private prison contracts included something called occupancy guarantees, requirements that the prisons maintain at least 90% full at all times. Think about what that means. If the prison population dropped too low, they'd lose money. They had a financial incentive to make sure people kept getting arrested and sentenced to long prison terms. Now, some people tried to debunk this by saying that BlackRock and Vanguard were just investment management companies. They didn't actually own these businesses. They just managed other people's money invested in them. But here's the thing. When you manage trillions of dollars in investments, when you're one of the largest shareholders in dozens of major corporations, you have influence. You have a voice in boardroom decisions. You have the power to shape corporate strategy. And if you're making money from both sides of the equation, from the music that creates criminals and from the prisons that house those criminals, then you have every incentive to make sure that cycle continues. In the 1960s, when Black America was fighting for civil rights, our leaders looked like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. These were Black men in suits, fighting for freedom with dignity and intelligence. They commanded respect through excellence. They spoke with purpose and power. When white America looked at them, they had to acknowledge our humanity, our intelligence, our right to equality. Fast forward to the 1990s and 2000s, and something had fundamentally changed. Hip-hop had flipped the script entirely. Instead of promoting dignity, it started glorifying criminality. Instead of, I have a dream, I got 99 problems. Instead of fighting the system, we started celebrating being trapped in it. Black men went from wearing suits and demanding respect to wearing chains and glorifying prison culture. And somehow, we were convinced this was keeping it real. But here's what keeping it real actually meant. It meant accepting the worst stereotypes about ourselves and making them our identity. It meant choosing trap houses over college classrooms. It meant glorifying baby mama drama over building stable families. It meant making violence and criminality seem cool to our children. Now, let's be clear about something important. We have plenty of stable, thriving Black families in America. For every broken home, there are countless Black families that are doing well. Fathers present, mothers strong, children excelling in school and life. Black excellence exists in every community across this country. But here's the problem. Those families don't get the spotlight. The media machine, the same machine that profits from our dysfunction, doesn't want to show you the Black family that stays together, builds wealth, and raises successful children. They don't want to show you the Black father who coaches Little League and helps with homework every night. They don't want to show you the Black mother who's running her own business while raising honor roll students. Why? Because positive images don't sell the narrative they need. They can't justify mass incarceration if they show you Black families that are thriving. They can't maintain the stereotype of Black pathology if they highlight Black success stories. We've got more videos coming that dive deep into the systematic destruction of Black communities, from COINTELPRO's war on the Black Panthers, to the Tuskegee experiments, to the crack epidemic that destroyed a generation. You should check out our video on Fred Hampton, the man that terrified the FBI. Peace.